Oh, I've got to get that. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about another sewing topic. When people find out that I sew, they often ask me like, oh yeah, it must be so much cheaper to sew your own clothes rather than buy them, right? So I wanted to sort of like dissect this and give you guys the details about it, because oftentimes people do think it's cheaper to sew your own clothes, or they want to sew their own clothes in order to like save money. And there's a couple different factors. It's a hard question to just give like a yes or no answer to. I will say that in my own case, it is not cheaper to sew clothes than to purchase them. So there's a couple different factors that go into this. First of all, you have to, like, unless someone has given you like a sewing machine and the full setup and all of that, then you know, you have to purchase all those things. So there's the machine, there's needles, there's thread, you know, and all the little bits that go with your sewing machine. So you have to sort of factor that in. You can get sewing machines used, you can get them at Goodwill often, you can get them for very reasonable prices, but you do have to factor that in. And usually you only have to buy it once, and then, you know, it'll last a number of years depending on the quality of the machine, how often you use it, all of that. So that's one thing. Now another thing is to look at sort of, in our society, things are currently like mass produced, and you can get things like, you can go to Walmart and you can buy, you know, a pair of pants for like $8 or $20 or whatever. So clothes these days are super cheap to buy in the stores. Now, if you're talking about like making a, you know, tailor-made, fitted, you know, professional business outfit, as opposed to, you know, buying like a couture suit, you know, it might be much cheaper to just purchase the fabric and make it yourself, as opposed to purchasing like one of those really high-end tailored items. But if you're just talking about like, I want to make myself like simple shirts and dresses, you know, and leggings, it's not gonna be cheaper to make them rather than just going out and buying them in the store. So for instance, I made the dress that I'm wearing right now. It's not a very good angle. So the fabric that I bought it for was about $10, I believe. So that's not bad. But then I bought a pattern, so that's about another $10. And then, you know, I had the pattern printed. So whatever, you know, the paper and the ink costs to get that printed. And then you have to sort of factor in your time, right? So first, I take my own measurements, you know, that takes 5 or 10 minutes. Then I take the time to, you know, locate which size I am and cut out the pattern for the size that I am. So that takes, I don't know, maybe half an hour in order to like get the right size and print it out and have it ready to go, depending on like the complicatedness of the pattern. Then you lay out your fabric, you put your pattern pieces on top of it, and you cut them all out. So that takes anywhere between, you know, maybe 25 minutes for a very simple pattern to, you know, maybe an hour if it's got a bunch of pattern pieces and you have to sort of jigsaw them onto your fabric to make everything fit. And then to sew it up, depending on if I'm interrupted by my kid or if I just have the time to just like sew all the way through, that could be another hour. So if you take a look at that, you know, it's maybe $30 in materials, you know, with all of the thread and the pattern and the fabric and all of that. And then you take a look at my time. Let's say I spent 2.5 hours. Even if you're considering my time is worth $10 an hour, that makes the dress that I made like, you know, a $60, $70 dress. In looking at those numbers, it's not really cost effective to sew your own stuff. Now I will say there are other situations where it becomes way more cost effective to sew. For instance, if you have a kid and like let's say you have a number of kids and you can take the stuff that the older kid grows out of and you can then alter it to fit your younger kids. It might only take you 10 minutes to alter it, and then you can hand me down those items a number of times. Or as a kid gets bigger, you can sometimes take what they already have and you can alter it so they can continue to wear it for longer. So those sorts of things can make sewing much more cost effective. Another thing that you can do is you can go to thrift stores and purchase things, and even if they aren't 100% perfect in the way that you want them to be, then you can take them home and you can alter them, so that gets rid of, the cost of your fabric, because you've already got, often you can buy things at the thrift store for less than it would cost to buy the fabric that it takes to make those things. So that's another way to do it in a way that's very cost effective. Another thing is, if your kid is like putting holes in their jeans and stuff like that, you can patch their jeans and that'll make them last longer. So if you know how to sew, you can often make your kids' like favorite clothes or best fitting clothes can last quite a bit longer. So that can help to sort of offset the cost of other aspects of sewing, like a machine, or if your machine has to get serviced or things like that. Another thing that I've seen people do that I thought was super smart is like if you go to Walmart or one of these other stores, they often have a clearance section. And if you take something from the clearance section that's maybe like 5 times too big or even 3 times too big or whatever, for instance, you can purchase like a plus size tank top or plus size pajama bottoms, or like these items that are larger than what you need, and you can then use them as your fabric and you can cut them down and make items for your kids or for yourself or whatever. For instance, Walmart has these tank tops that, I don't know, I think normally they're like $6 or $7, and sometimes when they go into the clearance area, they're like $1 or like 78 cents or maybe $2. But if you can find those and then bring them home, you can use them as fabric and make your kids items from these tank tops, which are basically just, a flat piece of fabric. So it's easy to purchase those things and then be able to make other things out of it. So that makes it very cheap. It makes it cheaper than just buying a yard of fabric. Another thing is that sometimes you can find fabric that is very cheap, and so even if you don't factor in all of your time and all of that, for instance, I purchased 3 yards of fabric yesterday in order to make some pajama pants for all 3 of us, me, my husband, and my son, and it ended up being, with like 2 coupons on it, it ended up being like $15 for all 3 yards. So that's really, really reasonable, and I already have our measurements taken, and I already have the pattern pieces cut out, and I know what sizes we are. So in order to sew those up, it would just take, if I got like an uninterrupted, probably 2 hours, I could lay everything out, cut it all out, and have it sewn up. So that makes it cost effective. Once you have your sizing and your patterns picked out and you know what fits everyone and you're used to sewing it and it's just like really zip, 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 very quick to sew things up, then it becomes more cost effective the more you do it, essentially. Another thing that you can do is often there are people who will give away like large bags of clothing for free, on community groups or free gifting groups or things like Buy Nothing or whatever. So if you can get bags of clothing from those groups, then you can use them for their fabric. So you could take, a pair of yoga pants for a woman and you could turn it into some leggings for your kid, So there's a bunch of different ways to make sewing cost effective, but as a general rule, I wouldn't say that it is cheaper. And as a hobby, it's something where you're like, at least for me, if I go out to the craft store and I see a fabric that I like, even if I don't know what I'm gonna do with it, I'm like, oh, I've gotta get that. And so I've definitely put way more money into like purchasing fabric than I have, you know, sewn things up. And I think that's often what people do when they get into sewing. So that's also a factor, right? Like, I would have to sew a lot of clothes to offset the amount of money that I've put into purchasing fabric, but I have the fabric there, and at any point in time, I can decide to do a project, and I have everything that I need in order to be able to do that project. Those are some of the details. You know, I've gotten that question a lot, and I figured I would address it. September is National Sewing Month, so I'm excited to get these sewing videos out to you guys. I hope you're doing good. If you want to see something specific on the subject of sewing, or if you have a particular question, please drop me a comment below. I would love to hear from you guys.